What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Barbie, the new blockbuster smash film from Greta Gerwig, starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, and a slew of other familiar faces. Barbie, of course, is a bigger blockbuster than anyone could have possibly imagined. One half of Barbenheimer, the highest grossing opening weekend ever from a female director, major W for Gerwig. Check the link below. I talked all about the Barbenheimer phenomenon and what it means and this crazy and unique moment we are currently in between Barbie and Oppenheimer. So check the link below for that, as well as my review of Oppenheimer, which I also really liked. Barbie, I thought was fantastic. I love how meta and self-aware and just plain out funny it was. I think it's a real blast and a really enjoyable time, and it's so cool that it's been as successful as it is. And Gerwig is someone who I think people that know her movies have really been invested in at this point. You know, Lady Bird, one of the best films of the 2010s, followed up by Little Women, the signature adaptation of a story that had been adapted many, many times. And now she's leveled up, much like Christopher Nolan, her Barbenheimer peer. Gerwig has leveled up with an IP blockbuster and incredibly raised her profile. It's a really cool story. And obviously, the theater experience for many with Barbie has been amazing this past weekend. It's a special time. But I think Barbie, just as a film, independent of all this mania, which has been so fun to be a part of, the film itself, I think, is really impressive. Um, just kind of right off the bat, you think about it, it's like, oh, Barbie, that's kind of a Craven IP film. We saw the New Yorker article come out. Mattel is going to raid their toy box and make movies about anything they possibly can. Barbie, arguably their most famous property. It makes sense they started here. That's all, I think a lot of people had a lot of cynical views on that. And for me, I was always, from the very beginning when this was announced, I was like, well, you know what? I trust Greta. I think she deserves the benefit of the doubt. And thankfully, I think the self-awareness this movie presents really from the start makes it so much fun to be with, and it's also a really enjoyable vehicle for Gerwig's sense of the world and her general point of view that she puts into all of her movies and all of her works. And I think the fact that it's able to be just kind of broadly fun and entertaining while also communicating some familiar Gerwig themes just, I think, makes it quite impressive, and it's kind of a blast. I think from the jump, the whole conception of Barbie Land as a place where all the Barbies hang out and hang out as toys. We watch Margot Robbie like not actually drink anything, like she's an actual toy, right? They make jokes about the fact that they don't actually have any genitalia like the real life dolls, things of that nature. That's all quite fun, and like watching them go through their day, where it's always positive, there's no consequences, there's nothing negative happening. That's like a really fun intro. Obviously, this movie is loaded with famous people, apart from Robbie and Gosling. Other Barbies played by Kate McKinnon and Issa Rae and Alexandra Shipp and Emma Mackey, Ritu Arya, Dua Lipa. It's a long list. And then on the other side with the Kens, after Ryan Gosling, we have Simu Liu and Kingsley Ben-Adir and Ncuti Gatwa and John Cena. Another character in Barbie Land, Alan, played by Michael Cera. It's a lot of people we know, right? And there's more to come. But I think it's like a really fun thing to be in. And then, this movie very quickly becomes existential, for Barbie, titular stereotypical Barbie, Margot Robbie's specific Barbie, which is just really funny. And there's a great joke later on in the movie where Helen Mirren, the narrator of the film, notes that if you're trying to make a point about Barbie no longer feeling pretty, it's less effective when you have Margot Robbie playing the character, because obviously she is just conventionally gorgeous, as we all know. But Barbie getting existential, considering like what happens when you die, things snowball, and Barbie ends up going to the real world, and Ken tags along. Ryan Gosling, Beach Ken, as it were, and I think it's really funny how Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, who co-wrote the screenplay with her, it's really funny how they kind of I think, hilariously yada yada, like the dimensions of this world where it's like, oh yeah, like Barbie's just when this happens, they just travel through various vehicles across to the real world. And then when you go back, you just go back. You don't have to know how it works. And like they really kind of lampoon that idea. And I think that's really funny. When they get to the real world, you know, I think this is where the movie starts to really shine, in terms of its perspective, where, uh, you know, Barbie comes to our world, which, the male dominated world, and her perception of how women are viewed in society is not what she expected in the perfect, picturesque world of Barbie Land, right? Where women rule the world. And that, I think, is really great. And I wasn't expecting the juxtaposition with Ken, where Ken, someone who, by his existence as a Ken doll, has no actual purpose besides being near Barbie. Like, he has nothing that can fulfill him, and he has nothing that he can do. And Ken coming to our real world and seeing how accepted he can be broadly right away, just for the fact of being a, large adult male. It's like that, I think, juxtaposition is done really well. And then that leads you into the third act, where Ken flips Barbie Land on its head and it becomes Kendom. And that, I think, is just, I think, a really smart read on how to like take this character in this movie, and setting you up with this like really great act three, where the Barbies, have been like kind of brainwashed into, being in like basic like servitude and like under, male rule and whatnot. And there's this scheme to, convince the or like trick the males into like, being able to de-brainwash all the Barbies and stuff. And I think that third act is really enjoyable. That first act is also really enjoyable. If there's anything to like criticize about the film, it's probably the middle act, where we encounter, Mattel. Mattel is actually in the movie. Will Ferrell plays the CEO of the company of Connor Swindells, as like a lowly office worker there. And I thought it was quite funny how, we know Mattel is very involved in the making of this movie, and we know they want to make movies about more of their toys. We know this, but Mattel is like being like openly being laughed at in the movie, and like lampooned and joked about and stuff. And like, there's all these male executives and talking about this female brand and Barbie and things like that. And it's like, I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that much of like a ribbing to happen to Mattel, but it's definitely in there. Also, in the real world, you have, someone who works at Mattel, a mom, played by America Ferrera, who actually we learn is like the cause of like Barbie's, changing psyche. And she gets to give, towards the end of the movie in Act 3, I think, this really great monologue about what it's like to be a woman in the world, in the real world. And that's, I think, just a great like expression of like Gerwig's ideas, which she always kind of puts into her movies. And, her daughter is a big part of the movie as well, Ferrera's character's daughter. And that's, I think, also a great moment where in Act 2, Barbie goes to a school, encounters the daughter, and the daughter, Gen Z girl, completely dresses down Barbie and talks about all the shitty effects of Barbie on society, to, putting forward a unrealistic standard of beauty and things of that nature. And I'm just really happy that like all that kind of stuff was in the movie, and just like that I think that continued and unrelenting kind of self-awareness about what Barbie means and doesn't mean in our actual real world here. Um, it's just quite enjoyable. And again, despite all that like intelligence that's like in the movie, it's also, I think, just really funny. The Ryan Gosling performance is getting a lot of love. He's really committed to playing Ken, and he kind of goes through the existential crises as well, especially towards Act 3. Really enjoyable. I think the I'm Just Ken song moment in the movie is hilarious. Honestly, just a really funny song performed by Gosling. You have like the Ken face off. Simu Liu has like a nice like foil presence as like the rival Ken to Gosling's Ken. But that the Ken like dance off dance battle moment's great. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think Gosling he's like just really fun to be with. But Robbie is also really great. We know how good an actor Gosling and Robbie are, but I don't think Barbie would have been able to work if Margot Robbie wasn't as good, because she has to play, I think, a lot of different tones and kind of juggle a lot as she carries the movie, and she's able to do that. Obviously, we know how great she is. And I think it'll probably end up being a bit of an underrated performance. I think everyone's going to talk about Ken because Ken's so fun and Gosling's so fun as Ken, but you really need this Robbie performance to land for this to really work. And thankfully it does. I think, and again, I think it's a difficult part that Robbie had, and she's able to really nail it. Yeah, I mean, most of the supporting cast, it's truly supporting cast. They don't have a whole lot to do, you know. Will Ferrell is pretty enjoyable just doing Will Ferrell things as the CEO. I don't think the Mattel people have a whole lot to really do in the movie. They have some funny lines and some expressions of the general themes, but they're perhaps a little underutilized. Secret MVP is probably Michael Cera as Alan. He has some really funny stuff going on, which I quite enjoy. Alan, Ken's best friend, introduced in 1964. I'm seeing here. Shout out Ken and Alan. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like there's a lot to like really like pick apart and think about as well. But even if you don't want to do that, it's just fun and it's enjoyable. And like I think the self-awareness I think really endears the movie to its audience, and that's what I think really makes it stand out to me. So I thought Barbie was like a genuine blast, a genuinely clever and creative movie, and I don't know how you could have done a movie about Barbie and Ken toys any better than how you did this. And I think the fact that it's so existential really rises above any other way you could have taken this kind of story. So shout out Gerwig and Bombach. We know how great they are as writers, but I think they really killed it here. Gerwig, her next project is developing, sounds like 2 Narnia films for Netflix. Definitely wouldn't have been my first choice for what she could do next, but Barbie also wouldn't have been on that list either. So again, I think she earned the benefit of the doubt with this. This is the biggest movie Robbie and Gerwig and Gosling have been a part of, and this is basically the signature movie event of the year. I thought it would be a hit. I didn't think it would be like this. It's crazy. Again, check the link below for my discussion about Barbenheimer as a phenomenon. Crazy stuff here. Check out my link below for Oppenheimer as well, another movie I like that, of course, is very different than this. And let me know what you thought about Barbie. What was your favorite part about it? What was the funniest thing to you? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.